In this last video for this section, we're going to talk a little bit about data cleaning. So I have a spreadsheet here from a previous semester where we had the class input some data about themselves, about maybe some questions that are the same this year, maybe they're a little bit different in some cases. But we're going to just talk about what cleaning looks like with kind of a similar data set here. So the reason that we need to clean is because if we're going to be doing analysis in R, we want the formatting to be consistent with the entries in the cells. And so a really good example is right over here. This question asks about how many miles from Champaign is home from you, or is home for you. And a lot of students entered a numeric answer, which is what we want. That is easy to analyze if we had that numeric entry. Some students put some different answers here. Some students put units like miles. This student said Champaign, right? So that's kind of a problem because R is not going to know what to do with these responses. It's going to see the text part and it's going to ignore the whole cell instead of just see this as a numeric entry. So computers are very good at doing what you ask them to, as long as the instructions are super clear and you don't add ambiguity. And so these kinds of things are going to confuse a computer when you give it instructions. So what we want to do here is to take out the units. We want to just rewrite 129, 106 for these kinds of cells. The other thing is for these answers like Champaign, so this is not a numeric entry, right? It's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Well, I can still use my judgment, and I can say, well, if you're in Champaign, that means that you must be 0 miles from Champaign. So I'm just going to put 0 and make a judgment call here, and I feel pretty good about making that change. Now, if a student said something else, like if they said some other city, I suppose I could look it up myself if I wanted to take the time, but it's also okay to just delete to clear cells when there's ambiguous information and you don't feel comfortable making a judgment call about what the data value should be for that cell. All right, so there's going to be some other words as well. So like, let's say we go over here, how old were you when you first rode on an airplane? So something that we might notice here is that this question asks for it, or actually, it's not really clear in what format we want these answers. I'm guessing most people are putting their year and age. Some people put months, right? Well, this is not going to be a consistent type of format, obviously, because 10 for this person is not going to be the same as 10 for this person, presumably. So we probably want to update these. Maybe the easiest thing to just put that they would be 0 years old, meaning that they haven't reached an age of 1 yet if we want to be really consistent. That's what I would probably do. If I just want to make that kind of simple and I want to make that consistent throughout. Now this person just said NA, meaning not applicable, so that probably means that they haven't been on an airplane before. So if that's the case, I think what I'm going to do, actually, we might want to just keep the NAs because we want to separate that out from people who didn't respond at all. In some cases, again, it might be okay to clear them, but in this case, I think it's okay to just keep the NAs and then we can filter them out later. Now this person said I was 3 years old, so obviously that doesn't really work. We want to just change that to 3 and just have that consistent numeric entry. All right, sometimes people might say a range of values, and let's see if we can find an example in here. So I just have to look around. What would be a good question that gives you a range? I think this one. So here, we have a question about how many videos would you want 2 hours of content to be split across? And this person said 4 or 5. So that, again, doesn't work if we had the text in there. That's not a numeric entry. So we have to make a judgment call and either just pick one number or we should just clear them consistently if we have that. I err on the side of keeping the data if it's reasonable to make that change, because I'd rather have the data than to lose it, right? I don't want to kind of consistently lose information when the variability is so small. So I would make the choice to just change this to 4. I'm just going to pick the first number they say if they only picked, between 2 values. Now, if you have a much wider range, that's a little bit different. Like if somebody said between 4 and 7, it's kind of hard to make a judgment call about what that would mean, right? So maybe I would just clear the cell if the range is a little bit wider than I feel comfortable making a judgment call for. All right, let's see what else I have on my list to talk about. Um, let's talk about some of these dates as well. So sometimes when you're working with data in Excel, it's kind of the running joke with Excel is that Excel likes to change values to dates. And this happens a lot with ranges. So if somebody put 2-4, like 2-4 like this, Excel might change that to a date. So the first thing that you can do is you can kind of reconstruct what is the answer that was probably put in, and then decide if I want to, make a judgment call about it. In general, if it just makes it easier, I would just delete all the date references because they're usually created because somebody puts a range, and since ranges can be a little bit questionable if they're not, too narrow, maybe it's easier just to clear cells when we find dates. Now, if I wanted to keep that, I will show you what I would do. So let me just undo that. I would clear this. I would pick a number and just put it in, and notice that it still changes it to a date. So what you might do is just try messing with the formatting and try the general format up here. So if we get it off that format that it was on, then it will stay as a number now. So that's how you would change the date if you wanted to keep the data there. All right. A few other notes. So you don't want to throw out outlier values in general. So if somebody said a really large number, I'm curious if I can find a good example on here. I don't see a really good example. Let's say that somebody said like, ooh, this looks like a big one over here. So $100 million. And you might be thinking, well, that's not a reasonable answer, so maybe I should just clear it. I would say no. I would say go ahead and keep the value, and that's because data cleaning doesn't necessarily mean filtering out kind of unusual values. As long as it fits, as long as it's still a number in this case and it fits this column, we can keep it in for now and then decide in the analysis phase if we want to delete that reference or filter out that reference. So don't clear values just because they're unusually high or unusually low. You can make exceptions if somebody wrote an answer and it was like, $10 gazillion, you don't have to write, 10 and a bunch of zeros after it in that case. I think that would be fair to delete. Okay. Regarding these financial ones, so some people, for the salary one, some people are going to put dollar signs, some people are not. If you want to be really consistent with that, it's totally okay to go over here and just make them all dollar signs. This is not going to affect the analysis, so this is a symbol that's actually okay to include in the spreadsheet before analysis. It's not going to mess up the values. R can actually kind of read through the dollar sign. It's not going to throw off the value inside. So that would be my tip, is just to make them all dollar signs, but you can also choose to make them not dollar signs as well if you want to just make them all general format. It really doesn't hurt anything either way. Let's see. I also want to show you something about rounding here as well. So if you want to round a particular cell or a particular column, there's some nice rounding buttons over here. They should be kind of in this number or formatting area. So if you click on this one, it usually, let's see. Okay, it's not going to let me do it for the whole thing. Let me just do it for one at a time then. If you click this one, it's going to add decimals. If you click this one, it's going to take away decimals. So that's one way to get your decimals consistent. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we do making a data table with summary values in it. That might be a situation where you want to kind of make your decimals consistent. All right, last note that I believe I have is to what to do if you see kind of these empty rows. So because of the nature of this particular assignment, there are going to be some empty rows where someone filled out the data entry form but didn't actually write anything in. So if that's the case, it's okay to just go ahead and delete the whole row like that. So you can just right click on it, click delete, and then that whole row will go away. I might do some of this before you get the data that you'll eventually be cleaning, so it may not be a problem, but if I miss any, that's totally fair to just go ahead and delete the empty rows. In some cases, you might also find some duplicate rows. Maybe somebody filled it out twice because maybe they forgot to get the submission code at the end. Again, I'm going to try to catch those. I'm going to say, just for the sake of this assignment, don't delete any suspected duplicate rows just to make it simpler if we're all using the same spreadsheet. Ideally, though, if you were cleaning, though, it would be fine to delete what you are quite sure is a duplicate entry. And I'm going to try to do that ahead of time. But go ahead and just like leave the rows as they are, or I should say, if you think you found a duplicate entry, you can go ahead and leave it as it is. All right, that was a lot of things, but hopefully that helps kind of guide you with the data cleaning segment, and hopefully we can also help you in office hours if you have any other questions.